Uses of Anger by Audre Lorde. Women respond to racism. My response to racism is anger. I have lived with that anger, ignoring it, feeding upon it, learning to use it before it laid my visions to waste for most of my life. Once I did it in silence, afraid of the weight. My fear of anger taught me nothing. Your fear of that anger will teach you nothing also. Women responding to racism means women responding to anger. The anger of exclusion, of unquestioned privilege, of racial distortions, of silence, ill use, stereotyping, defensiveness, misnaming, betrayal, and co-optation. My anger is in response to racist attitudes and to the actions and presumptions that arise out of those attitudes. If your dealings with other women reflect those attitudes, then my anger and your attendant fears are spotlights that can be used for growth in the same way I have used learning to express my anger for growth, but for corrective surgery, not guilt. Guilt and defensiveness are bricks in a wall against which we all flounder. They serve none of our futures. I'm going to give you a few examples of interchanges between women that illustrate these points. And in the interest of time, I'm going to cut them short. But please know that there are many, many more. Example 1. I speak out of direct and particular anger at an academic conference, and a white woman says, "Tell me how you feel, but don't say it too harshly, or I cannot hear you." But is it my manner that keeps her from hearing, or the threat of a message that her life may change? Would you still listen to me if I didn't speak in soft, soothing tones with crochet? After I read from my work entitled Poems for Women in Rage, a white woman asks me, "Are you going to do anything with how we deal directly with our anger? I feel it is so important." I ask, "How do you use your rage?" And then I have to turn away from the blank look in her eyes before she can ask me to participate in her own annihilation. I do not exist to feel her anger. To the white women present who recognize these attitudes as familiar, but most of all, to all of my sisters of color who live and survive thousands of such encounters, to my sisters of color who, like me, still tremble their rage under the harness, or who sometimes question the expressions of our rage as useless and disruptive. The two most popular accusations. I want to speak about anger, my anger, and what I have learned from my travels through its dominions. Women of color in America have grown up within a symphony of anger. Symphony of anger at being silenced, at being unchosen, at knowing that when we survive, it is in spite of a world that takes for granted our lack of humanness and which hates our very existence outside of its service. You call on us when you need us and discard us when you're done. And I say symphony rather than cacophony because we have had to learn to orchestrate those furies so that they do not tear us apart. We have had to learn to move through them and use them for strength and force and insight within our daily lives. Those of us who did not learn this, those of us who did not learn this difficult lesson, did not survive. To those women here who fear the anger of women of color more than their unscrutinized racist attitudes, I ask, is the anger of women of color more threatening than the women hatred that tinges all aspects of our lives? It is not the anger of other women that will destroy us, but our refusals to stand still, to listen to its rhythms, to learn within it, to move beyond the manner of presentation to the substance. Stop being performative. To tap that anger as an important source of empowerment. I cannot hide my anger to spare your guilt, nor your hurt feelings, nor answering anger. For to do so insults and trivializes all of our efforts. If I speak to you in anger, at least I have spoken to you. I have not put a gun to your head and shot you down in the street. I have not looked at your bleeding sister's body and asked, what did she do to deserve it? This is the reaction of two white women listening to Mary Church Terrell's telling of the lynching of a pregnant Black woman whose baby was then torn from her body. When women of color speak out of anger that laces so many of our contacts with white women, we are often told that we are creating a mood of hopelessness, preventing white women from getting past guilt, or standing in the way of trusting communication and action. But to turn aside from the anger of Black women with excuses or pretexts of intimidation is to award no one power. It is merely another way of preserving racial blindness, the power of unaddressed privilege, unbreached, intact. Black women are expected to use our anger only in the service of other people's salvation or learnings. But that time is over. My anger has meant pain to me, but it has also meant survival. And before I give it up, I'm going to make sure that there is something at least as powerful to replace it on the road to clarity.